So the Iron Claw is the story of Kevin Von Erich of the Von Erich wrestling family dynasty, played by Zac Efron. Von Erich is a beast of a man, huge, hulking creature who is a wrestler and is working his way up to become the world wrestling champion. His father is a brutal man, former wrestler as well, who's very excited for his son to move up, but also encourages his other sons who have this long, goofy blonde hair, and then like one's got an odd bowl cut. All of them are encouraged to get into wrestling or at least some kind of sport in some form or fashion. There's Kevin, there's Kiri, there's Carrie, there's David, and Mike. That's them in order. And they are all working towards the same goal of getting the family belt. But there's a little something odd about the Von Erich family, a family curse that they say in the film, that disaster may befall them right when they're right next to success, right? Just like what happened to their dad. And slowly over the course of the film, we discover that I don't know. Family brings us together, but boy, you can experience some challenges. It is a unique watch, and I think it might be some of Zac Efron's best work, along with Sean Durkin, who directed this feature. Excited to talk about it. Andy, what did you think of The Iron Claw?
I thought this was really phenomenal, and it had high hopes for it, and it definitely stood up. It's an examination of this curse that runs through their family. It's kind of the curse that's brought about by their father. It's one of these kind of self-fulfilling prophecies, but it's essentially about these really unrealistic expectations that get put on all the family. The father has like his favorites. He was like, well, you know my favorite. And he literally lists his favorite kids, like 1 through 4. And he's like, those rankings can always change.
Those rankings can
he's
change.
always pushing these kids harder and harder. There's a scene where Kevin Von Erich, Zac Efron's character, is clearly very hurt outside of the ring. It takes a long time to get up from a bump. And he's like, you got to get up faster than that. You think you're going to get the belt? And it just shows, like, it shows us what the curse is, and really it's essentially about toxic masculinity, to use a buzzword, but it shows us how those kinds of expectations on young men can really destroy them and their families. I thought it was really phenomenal, really incredible acting from Zac Efron, both a physical transformation and just he's the emotional heart of the film. And man, it's a tragic story. It's almost too tragic to be believable. Like, if this were fiction, you'd tell someone to, like, kind of lighten it up. Like, dude, you can't have this happen. But that's really what went down.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If this were fiction, some screenwriter along the way would have been like, you got to edit this and tighten this up. This doesn't work, and this doesn't come together. People aren't going to like. It's crazy, and I think that's part of what's so interesting about it. But to me, more interestingly, is like our setting, and like you said, our character of kind of masculinity in this movie. Wrestling is such a fascinating medium to set a story in, right? And it's usually fantastic in cinematic form. You can think of Scorsese with Raging Bull. Obviously, you've got your Rocky Balboa. Even like Clint Eastwood, right? $1 Million Baby. Like, you can tell incredible stories inside of a ring. And although those are boxing films, like wrestling is not all that dissimilar, right? Certainly a similar cinematic setting. And I think Sean Durkin does such a fantastic job of capturing functional performance, like by these actors in a wrestling setting where they are performing. Like, it kind of works out great, like you don't have to worry about Zac Efron and Jeremy Allen White like making a punch look convincing, but what they do have to do is look like these just absolutely ripped monsters, which they do. I can't believe the condition that Zac Efron is in this movie, like not only from like acting ability, but just physical, like outrageous ability. I remember seeing an interview from him after he did Baywatch, and he said that he didn't want to look like he looked in Baywatch really ever again, because it was awful, and he had to eat like this incredibly specific diet, and he had to deny himself all these things he likes in his life, and he had to be dehydrated so your muscles poke out, and it was like, I can't do that. Now he is so much further from that in this movie. It is bananas. He looks like he's halfway to like Dwayne The Rock Johnson. He's huge. And meanwhile, like, Jeremy Allen White is also real big. Harris Dickinson, the third brother, not quite as large. And God, who's the fourth one? Stanley Simons is Mike. He is like the leanest of all of them. He's the big softy, which gives you like this good broad range of brothers who all have different like ability and interest, I think.
Yeah, it's really part of the tragedy is that you have the three brothers, the older ones who are, all going to be in the ring. Like they're athletic, they're big, they're tough guys. They're definitely built for this kind of thing. And then Mike he's the artist of the family. He plays guitar, he's in a band, he plays a bunch of different instruments, but because of the pressure of the family and specifically their father, he gets roped into a career that he probably shouldn't be in, and doesn't like. He's a big guy because they're all big guys in this family, but he doesn't have like the size and the mass, and he ends up getting hurt pretty easily in the film.
I'm such a big fan of like the abusive dad in this movie. Obviously, nobody should be a fan of abusive father, but Holt McCallany is so great as this like Texas rancher, used to be a wrestler, thinks he knows everything dad, whose like hair is dyed this goofy yellow, like is fake as his hair color, but like he has such commanding presence over the family and specifically over the boys. Meanwhile, Mom Tierney is like totally on the back burner. She's like, "Well, you boys need to sort it out with yourselves. I'm doing my own thing." And like slowly over the course of the film, as things begin to unravel, the two of them like retreat into themselves more and more. He just gets more bitter and he gets harder on the boys and just keeps applying pressure, like his signature Iron Claw wrestling move. And meanwhile, like Tierney devolves into this like heartbreaking scene. She's fantastic. Really fantastic performances from our cast all around. Like really, really tremendous.
I think something else that I really liked about the film is it takes the viewer into the world of wrestling to better understand it. Because if you're not a fan of wrestling, a lot of people, well, why would I watch that? It's fake, and they take us into the. Well, yes, it's scripted, but it is a performance. You're there to put on a show and win over the audience. And that's what really is about, like these belts and things. It's like, who can be the best entertainer? Who can draw the biggest crowd, sell the most tickets, sell the most concessions? And it's interesting because Zac Efron's character is really good in the ring, but he's really terrible on the mic. Like when he goes to do the promos of like, this Saturday, I'm going to be meeting up with whoever, and I'm doing that whole Sunday kind of. He's terrible. He stutters. He's not confident. And then the taller David Von Erich, played by Harris Dickinson, like he's the opposite. He's much better. He's a much better showman, and he kind of helps bring that around. But it brings the audience into that world to understand it a little bit better about what they do, why it's important, and what they're trying to achieve. Because it's not a fight like a boxing or a wrestling match or an MMA or something like that. It's a different kind of entertainment.
Yeah, like sports wrestling entertainment, right? Yeah, that's the idea, and it's such an interesting idea to prop your characters up against. This idea that like if you just work harder, if you just push harder, like you push out one more set, you run one more lap, like you take one more bump, like you'll get there. And meanwhile, like you're in a setting where like ultimately like having persona matters, and being able to perform matters, and like having gravitas on camera matters. Like really interesting, like, and a fascinating little like blender to drop your characters into and just whirl them all up and run them into each other, and it happens. Like you fists fly in this movie, people fight, like there's a bit of violence for sure, but in the same way, like you get so much of the energy of like what I think wrestling entertainment should be. Like some of the promos that are reshot in here with like, I don't want to give any wrestlers away if you're a fan, but they have so much energy to them, like, and the music drives up under them, right? And Durkin just like has these long slow pull-ins on the ring, and these TVs playing stuff. Like it just has such a vibe, like, and it's such a delight to watch. Not to mention like a lot of classic rock in the soundtrack, which is great, and of course 70s Dallas, which looks like a great place to hang out. I'm sure it was. Hang out at the Sportatorium in 1976. Everything just feels very like authentic, and just takes you right back to your Von Erich Ranch.
Yeah, one thing that I think this story is very tragic. If you know what, I'm not going to spoil any of it here, but the movie does still manage to end on a triumph, end on our characters growing and kind of breaking the bonds of generational trauma. But it is at a high price. But it because some people are like, where is this? How is this story going to end? Like, where do we end? But we do, like most movies, we end on a triumph. That I think.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if you cut out or not for a second. I thought I lost you. No, I think overall, like Iron Claw ends up ending in a place that feels uniquely satisfying, and it's a bit of a magic trick because if you've heard, yeah, loose reviews from people like us who are like, "Wow, there's a lot happening in this movie," like it can seem really daunting, can seem really intimidating, but like I think there's a soft spot at the center of this movie that's. Really gratifying once you kind of drive to it. Also, like I said at the top, like tremendous performance from Efron. I think it's his best work. I'm sure there are people out there who are like, no, High School Musical's his best work. Respect. Really though, he is going to a new place. Like with a movie like this, if he can keep turning out movies like this, I don't know what he'll do next. Really fantastic all around. Andy, any other thoughts for recommendations?
I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend The Iron Claw?
Absolutely. It's definitely one of the year's best. Transformative performance by Zac Efron and the rest of the cast as well. Jeremy Allen White, who, of course, we love from The Bear. Harris Dickinson, who was in last year's Triangle of Sadness. Hope McCallany's always good. Very powerful story. Really takes you into this like kind of down and dirty world of professional wrestling and people trying to make it big in this career. Bit of a heartbreaker, but highly recommend.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think Iron Claw's super good. Great movie to take dad to. And I know it's like, hold on, generational trauma, but like really it's going to be like classic rock and like wrestling and like all of those are things that like dudes will connect to. And I think like ultimately the message is not going to rattle anybody's cage. It's a good time. Like it's surprisingly good, I think. A little long, but not nearly as I should say much more engrossing than the other feature we're going to talk about and in this episode, Maestro, which we need to get to. But first, before we do, we need to talk about something that's been particularly heated. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, we have been working on this thing day and night. We've been down in the lab, like cooking up the best possible lists we can come up with, and I'm excited to reveal. Andy, do you want to do the honors?
It's time for the death of cinema.